Millionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test his girlfriend, but finds true love with the Maid. Alexander Thorne lived in a gilded cage of his own making. At 32, he owned half the city skyline, but his heart felt as cold and empty as his marble-floored penthouse. His latest girlfriend, Chloe, was stunning, a socialite with a laugh like tinkling crystal and a wardrobe worth more than most people's houses. But whispers followed her, whispers of gold digging, of fleeting attention spans, of love measured in carats and square footage. Alexander, scarred by past betrayals, couldn't shake the doubt. He needed proof that someone could love him, not just the billionaire. His solution was cruel, born of privilege and paranoia. He'd fake a devastating spinal injury. Confined to a wheelchair, stripped of his power and mobility, he'd see who truly stayed. He orchestrated it meticulously, a staged accident during a charity polo match, a carefully managed recovery in his penthouse, complete with doctors murmuring grim prognoses. Chloe was devastated, or so she claimed. Her tears flowed freely at the hospital, her hand fluttering over his in a show of concern. But back in the penthouse, the performance began to crack. Alexander watched, hidden behind the curtain of his deception. Chloe's visits became shorter, her sighs louder. She complained about the depressing atmosphere, the inconvenience of his needs. She'd flinch when he needed help adjusting his blanket, her designer-clad fingers barely brushing the fabric. One afternoon, he overheard her on the phone, voice sharp with frustration. "Ugh, it's like living with a ghost. And the smell? How long is this charade supposed to last? My manicure budget is suffering just looking at him." The words were shards of ice in his chest. The test was over. She'd failed spectacularly. Despair threatened to swallow him whole. He was trapped in his own lie, surrounded by luxury that felt like ash, and the one person he'd hoped might see past the money had proven as shallow as the rest. That's when Elena entered his field of vision. Elena wasn't hired for her looks, though she possessed a quiet, earthy beauty. She was hired for her efficiency, her quiet competence. She cleaned the penthouse with a silent grace, her movements economical, her presence unobtrusive. Alexander had barely registered her before his accident. Now, confined to his chair, he saw everything. He saw how she'd pause her dusting to gently adjust the angle of his reading lamp when the sun shifted, without him asking. He saw the way she'd meticulously arrange his medications, her brow furrowed in concentration. He saw the genuine concern in his eyes when she brought his meals, simple, nourishing food she'd often prepare herself, unlike Chloe's untouched gourmet deliveries. One rainy evening, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his deception and Chloe's betrayal, Alexander dropped his water glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Chloe, lounging nearby scrolling through her phone, barely glanced up. "Honestly, Alex, must you be so clumsy? Call Elena." But Elena was already there. She didn't sigh or roll her eyes. She knelt silently, carefully gathering the shards, her movements calm and unhurried. As she reached for the last piece near his wheelchair, her hand brushed his. It wasn't flirtatious. It was an accident. But in that fleeting touch, Alexander felt something he hadn't in years. Warmth. Real, unguarded warmth. "Are you all right, Mr. Thorne?" she asked softly, her voice like worn velvet. Her eyes, deep brown and kind, held no pity, only quiet concern. I'm fine, Elena," he stammered, suddenly feeling exposed, not just physically in his chair, but emotionally. Just frustrated. She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. "Frustration is heavy," she said simply, standing and placing the shards in the bin. "Sometimes the weight feels impossible to lift alone." She didn't offer empty platitudes, she just saw him. Days turned into weeks. Chloe's visits dwindled to nothing, replaced by terse texts about needing space. Alexander's isolation deepened, but Elena's quiet presence became his anchor. He noticed the small things, the way she'd leave a single perfect gardenia on his bedside table,
his mother's favorite flower, mentioned once in passing months ago. How she'd hum softly while cleaning, a gentle, unfamiliar melody that soothed his frayed nerves. He started talking to her, tentatively at first, then with growing ease. He spoke of his fears, his loneliness, the hollowness of his wealth. She listened without judgment, offering simple wisdom born of a life far removed from his gilded world. One afternoon, the truth became unbearable. The lie was poisoning him. As Elena helped him transfer from the chair to the sofa, a task she performed with practiced care and zero condescension, he couldn't do it anymore. "Elena," he choked out, his voice thick with shame, "I need to tell you something terrible." He confessed everything. The fake accident, the test, Chloe's failure, his own crushing guilt. He braced for disgust, for her to walk away in anger at his arrogance and cruelty. She was silent for a long moment, her hand still gently supporting his arm. Then she met his eyes, her expression not angry, but profoundly sad. "You hurt yourself most of all, Mr. Thorne, and you hurt others with your fear." She didn't absolve him, but she didn't abandon him either. "The truth is heavy too," she added, her voice softening. "But it's the only ground you can stand on." Her words were a lifeline. With Elena's quiet support, Alexander faced the consequences. He publicly revealed the deception, weathering the scandal and Chloe's furious, humiliated exit. He sold the penthouse, downsized dramatically, and dedicated himself to genuine philanthropy, work that finally gave his wealth meaning. And through it all, Elena stayed, not as a maid, but as a friend, then something more profound. Her love wasn't born of his bank account or his power, but of the flawed, vulnerable man he'd become when stripped bare, first by his own lie, then by her unwavering honesty. She saw the man beneath the myth, the billionaire, and the broken pretender. 1 year later, Alexander really stood, on a small balcony overlooking a modest, sun-drenched apartment. In his arms was Elena, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand in his. The city lights glittered below, but they held no allure compared to the quiet warmth beside him. "I tested for loyalty," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair, "and found something infinitely more valuable: truth and you." Elena smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and lit up the room. "The best things," she said softly, "are never found in the tests we set for others, Alexander. They're found when we finally stop hiding from ourselves." In the humble space they'd built together, far from marble floors and designer tears, Alexander Thorne, the man who once owned everything but felt nothing, finally understood what real wealth truly looked like. It looked like Elena. It looked like love, earned not through deception, but through the courage to be seen, flaws and all. If you believe in kindness and justice, please like, share, and subscribe to ACA Storytales for more heroic emotional stories. Your support helps us spread hope to millions. Thanks for watching.